The words hung in the air, heavy and final, like the last shovelful of dirt on a coffin. I'm sorry I believed them. Grandma Eleanor's familiar, elegant script, the curve of the S just so, the way she always dotted her I's with a tiny, perfect circle. But the meaning? It was a punch to the gut, a betrayal that echoed louder than the lawyer's droning voice. Believed who? About what? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything. The call had come on a Tuesday, a day like any other, except it wasn't. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain, much like the storm brewing in my chest. Grandma Eleanor, the woman who was more mother to me than my own, was gone. Just like that. 1 minute she was there, her laughter echoing in the old house, the scent of lavender and old books clinging to her like a second skin, and the next, silence. A silence so profound it swallowed everything whole. I was 30, and for every one of those years, Grandma Eleanor had been my anchor, my safe harbor. She'd taken me in when I was a scrawny, scared kid, abandoned by a mother who chose a bottle over her own daughter, and a father who was a ghost, a whisper of a memory. Eleanor, with her no-nonsense attitude and a heart bigger than the ancient oak in her backyard, had patched me up, dusted me off, and taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet. Now the vultures were circling. My estranged family, faces I hadn't seen in years, suddenly materialized, their grief as fake as a $3 bill. There was Marcus, my cousin, all slicked back hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Manipulative, charming, he could talk a bird out of a tree and then sell the tree back to it. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, was his mother, a woman carved from ice, her gaze cold enough to freeze hell over. And Uncle Richard, Patricia's husband, a weak-willed man who found his courage at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. Their mourning was a performance, a carefully crafted charade for an audience of one the lawyer. Mine was a raw, gaping wound. Every corner of Grandma's house, a place that had always smelled of cinnamon and love, now reeked of their insincerity. I watched them, their hushed whispers, their feigned concern, and a bitter taste rose in my throat. They hadn't cared about Eleanor when she was alive, not really. They'd visit, sure, brief, perfunctory appearances that always seemed to coincide with a request for a loan or a favor. Now they were here, ready to pick over the bones. The days leading up to the funeral were a blur of forced smiles and veiled barbs. Patricia, with her pursed lips and disapproving glances, made it clear she thought I was somehow responsible for Eleanor's death. Marcus, ever the charmer, tried to ooze sympathy, but his eyes kept darting around the room, cataloging, assessing. Richard just stayed drunk, muttering apologies that made no sense. The funeral itself was an exercise in hypocrisy. Marcus delivered a eulogy that painted Eleanor as a saint and him as her devoted grandson, conveniently forgetting the years he'd been overseas, a euphemism for whatever shady dealings he was involved in. Patricia dabbed at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, while Richard swayed precariously in the front pew. I sat there, numb, the reality of Eleanor's absence a crushing weight. Afterward, back at the house, the air was thick with unspoken resentments and greedy anticipation. Mr. Henderson, Eleanor's lawyer, a kind, elderly man who looked as weary as I felt, announced the reading of the will would be the following morning at his office. The vultures exchanged knowing glances. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted them gone. I wanted my grandmother back. But some things I was learning you just couldn't have. The end of Grandma Eleanor was just the beginning of my nightmare. The storm hadn't just broken, it was about to unleash its full fury. And I was standing right in its path, with no umbrella, no shelter, just the crushing weight of a loss too big to comprehend. The lawyer's office was all polished mahogany and hushed tones, the kind of place where bad news was delivered with a sympathetic smile and a hefty bill. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus, Patricia, and Richard were already there, arranged around the large conference table like actors in a play. Their faces carefully composed masks of somber anticipation. I took the only remaining seat directly across from Marcus, his smug little smirk sending a shiver of unease down my spine. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. We are gathered here today for the reading of Eleanor Ainsworth's last will and testament. He paused, his gaze sweeping over us, lingering for a moment on me. I could feel their eyes on me, dissecting, judging. As Mr. Henderson began to read, my mind drifted. Flashbacks, sharp and vivid, flickered behind my eyelids. Grandma Eleanor teaching me to bake her famous apple pie, her hands, gnarled with age but still strong, guiding mine. Her laughter, warm and infectious, as we danced in the living room to old records. Her comforting presence beside me, reading bedtime stories. Her voice a soothing balm to my childhood fears. She had been my world, my everything. How could she be gone? How could this be happening? And to my beloved granddaughter, Olivia, Mr. Henderson's voice pulled me back to the present. I leaned forward, my heart thumping, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness. Perhaps she hadn't forgotten me. Perhaps she knew how much I loved her. I leave the small rosewood keepsake box from my attic and the letter contained within. The room went silent. The keepsake box? That was it. I looked around, confused. Marcus was trying to suppress a triumphant grin. Patricia's face was a mask of cold indifference. Richard just stared blankly ahead, a half-empty flask peeking from his jacket pocket. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice devoid of emotion. The remainder of my estate, including the house, all financial assets, and personal belongings, I bequeath in equal shares to my grandson, Marcus Thorne, my sister, Patricia Thorne, and my brother-in-law, Richard Thorne. The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. It was a mistake. It had to be. Grandma Eleanor wouldn't do this to me, not after everything. I looked at Mr. Henderson, pleading with my eyes, but he just offered a small, pitying smile and slid the small, polished rosewood box across the table towards me. My hands trembled as I reached for it. It was the box I'd found years ago in the attic, filled with old family photos and documents. The one I'd used to piece together fragments of our family's fractured history. Now it held only a letter, a single folded piece of paper. With shaking fingers, I opened it. Grandma Eleanor's familiar handwriting, the elegant loops and precise dots, swam before my eyes. My dearest Olivia, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and my heart aches for the pain this will cause you. There is so much I need to explain, so much I didn't understand until it was too late. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I believed them. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. Believed who? I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Believed what? Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The pretense of grief vanished, replaced by a chilling coldness. Patricia sniffed disdainfully, her eyes raking over me with contempt. Richard mumbled something incoherent and took a long swig from his flask. And Marcus just smiled, a slow, smug, triumphant smile that chilled me to the bone. He knew. He'd known all along. This was his doing, their doing. The keepsake box felt heavy in my hands, a tangible symbol of their betrayal. Grandma Eleanor's last words, a cryptic apology, echoed in my mind. I'm sorry I believed them. The truth, I realized with a dawning horror, was far uglier than I could have ever imagined. And I was about to uncover it, piece by painful piece. The reading of the will wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a nightmare. The lawyer's office felt like a tomb. The scent of old paper and deceit hung heavy in the air. My grandmother's last words, I'm sorry I believed them, replayed in my mind, a broken record of pain and confusion. Believed who? About what? The question clawed at me, demanding an answer. Back in Eleanor's house, the silence was a living thing, pressing in on me from all sides. The house, once a sanctuary of warmth and love, now felt like a mausoleum, filled with ghosts and unanswered questions. I wandered through the rooms, touching her belongings, searching for something, anything, that would make sense of this madness. In her desk, tucked away beneath a pile of old bills, I found it. A copy of the revised will, dated just 3 weeks before her death. 3 weeks. My blood ran cold. Eleanor had been frail, yes, her memory starting to fade, but she hadn't been senile. Not then. Someone had influenced her, manipulated her, and I had a sickening feeling I knew who. Armed with this damning piece of evidence, I confronted them. Marcus, Patricia, and Richard were gathered in the living room, already divvying up Eleanor's possessions like vultures feasting on a carcass. You changed the will, I accused, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. She wouldn't have done this. Not to me. Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh. Oh, Olivia. Always so dramatic. Grandma simply came to her senses, realized who truly cared about her. Cared about her? I spat. Or cared about her money? Patricia stepped forward, her face a mask of icy disdain. Don't you dare accuse us, you ungrateful girl, after everything Eleanor did for you. Ungrateful? My voice rose, cracking under the strain. I loved her. I was the one who was here for her, day in and day out. Where were you? Off gallivanting around the world, Marcus. Or conveniently forgetting to visit, Patricia, unless you needed something. It was then that Marcus dropped the bombshell, his voice laced with a cruel satisfaction. We've been telling Eleanor the truth about you for months, Olivia. About how you were stealing from her, taking advantage of her good nature. Stealing? I gasped, horrified. I would never. Oh, but you did, Patricia chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. We showed her the evidence. The missing jewelry, the unexplained withdrawals from her bank account. She saw what you really were, Olivia, a thief, a user. My world tilted on its axis. The missing jewelry. A brooch Eleanor had misplaced months ago. The withdrawals. Money she'd given me willingly for groceries, for repairs to the house. They had twisted everything, poisoned her mind against me. She died believing I betrayed her? The words were a choked whisper. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My grandmother, the woman I loved more than anyone in the world, had died thinking I was a monster. The pain was unbearable, a searing agony that ripped through me, leaving me gasping for breath. Richard, drunk as usual, swayed on his feet, a flicker of something, guilt, in his bloodshot eyes. We didn't mean for it to go this far, he slurred. Just needed the money. Marcus said it was the only way. Collaboration. They had all been in on it. A carefully orchestrated scheme to discredit me, to isolate Eleanor, to get their greedy hands on her money. The betrayal was complete, absolute. I couldn't stay there, not another second. Their faces, their lies, their greed, it was all too much. I fled, stumbling out of the house, the sound of their laughter echoing in my ears. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, the rain lashing down, mirroring the tempest raging within me. I jumped into my car, the engine roaring to life, a desperate need to escape, to outrun the pain, propelling me forward. Tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision. Eleanor's letter, clutched in my hand, was a stark reminder of everything I had lost. I'm sorry I believed them. The words were a cruel taunt, a final, heartbreaking twist of the knife. She had known, or at least she had suspected, but it was too late. Too late for her, too late for me. The car hydroplaned, spinning out of control, the world a dizzying blur of rain and headlights. A tree loomed in front of me, dark and menacing, and then nothing. My last thought, as darkness enveloped me, was of Grandma Eleanor's letter. Her apology. A second chance I would never get. Or so I thought. A gasp. Not a gentle intake of breath, but a harsh, ragged sound, like air being sucked into a vacuum. My eyes snapped open. Disorientation, thick and cloying, wrapped around me like a shroud. Where was I? The last thing I remembered was the blinding headlights, the sickening crunch of metal, the rain. But this wasn't a hospital. This was my old bedroom, the one I'd had in Grandma Eleanor's house when I was younger. The faded floral wallpaper, the bookshelf overflowing with well-loved paperbacks, the worn-out teddy bear perched on the nightstand. It was all exactly as I remembered it, but how? Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. I scrambled out of bed, my legs shaky and unsteady. My reflection in the dresser mirror stopped me dead in my tracks. Staring back at me was a younger version of myself. My face was fuller, unlined, my hair longer, a lighter shade of brown. I looked 22. 22? But that was impossible. I was 30, or I had been. My head spun. Was this a dream? A hallucination? Was I dead? The questions swirled, a chaotic vortex of confusion and disbelief. Then I heard it. A sound that sent a jolt of electricity through me, a sound I thought I'd never hear again. Grandma Eleanor's voice humming a cheerful tune in the kitchen downstairs. Alive? My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of hope and terror. I stumbled out of the room, down the familiar creaking stairs, drawn by the sound of her voice like a moth to a flame. And there she was, standing at the stove, her back to me, flipping pancakes. She looked younger, healthier. The lines on her face were softer, her movements more spry. This wasn't the frail, fading Eleanor I remembered from those last heartbreaking weeks. This was Eleanor in her prime, vibrant and full of life. Grandma! The word was a choked whisper, barely audible. She turned, a smile lighting up her face when she saw me. Olivia, darling, you're finally awake. I was beginning to think you'd sleep all day. Her smile faltered, a flicker of concern in her eyes. Are you all right, dear? You look a bit pale. I couldn't speak. I just stared, my mind reeling, trying to process the impossible. This was real. This was happening. I was back. 8 years in the past. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring her beloved face. I lurched forward, wrapping my arms around her, burying my face in her familiar lavender-scented cardigan. She felt so real, so solid. Not a ghost, not a memory. Alive. Oh my goodness, Olivia, she exclaimed, surprised by my sudden display of emotion. What's all this about? She held me tight, her hand stroking my hair, just like she used to do when I was a child. I missed you, I sobbed, the words muffled against her shoulder. She pulled back, her brow furrowed with concern. Missed me? But I've been right here, darling. She studied my face, her gaze sharp and perceptive. You seem different, Olivia. Did something happen? Different. Yes, I was different. I was a woman haunted by a future she'd already lived, a future she now had a chance to change. A second chance. A chance to save Eleanor. A chance to expose the vipers in our family before they could strike. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. This wasn't just a strange dream or a cruel twist of fate. This was an opportunity. A gift. A chance to rewrite history. And I wasn't going to waste it. The next few days were a whirlwind of adjustment and disbelief. Waking up in my 22-year-old body in a world 8 years younger was like stepping into a parallel universe. Everything was familiar, yet subtly different. My old college textbooks lay scattered on my desk, a reminder of a life I'd almost forgotten. My friends were younger, their faces unmarred by the passage of time, their concerns frivolous and carefree compared to the heavy weight of knowledge I now carried. Grandma Eleanor, bless her heart, fussed over me, convinced I was coming down with something. She plied me with hot tea and chicken soup, her brow furrowed with worry whenever she caught me staring off into space, lost in thought. How could I explain to her that I was grieving a future she hadn't yet lived, mourning a betrayal that hadn't yet happened? I had to be careful. One wrong move, one careless word, and I could shatter this fragile second chance. I played the part of the slightly bewildered, slightly overwhelmed 22-year-old, while silently, desperately taking stock of my new reality. The most important thing, Eleanor was healthy. Her mind was sharp, her memory intact. The insidious creep of dementia hadn't yet begun to cast its shadow. This was before the decline, before the vulnerability that Marcus and his cronies had so cruelly exploited. And Marcus wasn't here. He was still overseas, according to Eleanor. His occasional postcards filled with vague assurances of his well-being and even vaguer promises of a return. A wave of relief washed over me. I had time. Time to prepare, time to build my defenses. Patricia and Richard, however, were already a familiar presence, their financial struggles a recurring theme in their conversations with Eleanor. Patricia, with her penchant for expensive clothes and a lifestyle they couldn't afford, was constantly hinting at temporary cash flow problems. Richard, his hands already starting to tremble from the effects of his drinking, would mumble apologies and promises to sort things out. Their motives, their desperation, it was all laid bare, a chilling preview of the darkness to come. One rainy afternoon, while Eleanor was out at her book club, I found myself drawn to the attic. It was just as I remembered it, dusty and filled with forgotten treasures. And there, tucked away in a corner, was the rosewood keepsake box. My heart pounded in my chest as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled amongst faded photographs and old letters, was a collection of documents. Eleanor's original will, written years ago, leaving everything to me. Bank statements, property deeds, a tangled web of family history and financial dealings that I had been too young, too naive to understand the first time around. I spent hours poring over those documents, piecing together the puzzle of my family's past. The simmering resentments, the hidden debts, the long-buried secrets. It was all there, a roadmap to the betrayal that had shattered my previous life. The knowledge was a heavy burden, but it was also a weapon. This time, I wouldn't be caught blindsided. This time, I would be ready. This time, I would protect Eleanor. I would protect myself. The path ahead was fraught with danger, a tightrope walk between past and future. But as I closed the keepsake box, a new sense of determination solidified within me. I had been given a second chance, a miracle I didn't deserve but would fight tooth and nail to protect. The game was afoot, and this time, I knew the rules. The first step was to get closer to Eleanor, to become an indispensable part of her life. "I'm thinking of moving back in for a while, Grandma," I announced one evening, feigning a financial crisis. "Rent is so expensive, and I could save up, help you around the house." Eleanor, bless her unsuspecting heart, was thrilled. "Oh, Olivia, that would be wonderful. It gets so lonely here sometimes." And just like that, I was back in my childhood home, sleeping in my old bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of my past and the looming threat of my future. But this time, I wasn't a helpless victim. I was a protector, a sentinel, standing guard against the darkness I knew was coming. My days became a carefully orchestrated campaign to safeguard Eleanor's well-being, both physically and financially. I started subtly, documenting her current wishes, her thoughts on the future, her opinions of various family members. I'd engage her in casual conversations, guiding her towards topics that would reveal her true feelings, her clear-headedness. And I kept a detailed journal, a secret record of her lucidity, a counter-narrative to the lies I knew Marcus would eventually try to spin. Next, I tackled the legal front. I reconnected with an old college friend, Sarah, now a sharp, ambitious lawyer specializing in estate planning. "Grandma's been talking about updating her will," I told Sarah, feigning a casual concern. "She wants to make sure everything is in order, just in case." Sarah, unaware of the high-stakes drama unfolding behind the scenes, was more than happy to help. Together, we guided Eleanor through the process of creating a new will, one that was ironclad, bulletproof, leaving no room for misinterpretation or manipulation. We established a trust with specific provisions to protect Eleanor's assets from predatory family members. I made sure Eleanor understood every clause, every legal term, her signature a testament to her sound mind and clear intentions. Then came the physical defenses. "Grandma, I've been thinking," I said one morning, feigning a sudden inspiration. "With all these break-ins in the neighborhood, maybe we should get some security cameras, just for peace of mind. Eleanor, ever practical, readily agreed. Soon the house was outfitted with a discreet network of cameras, their unblinking eyes recording every interaction, every visitor, every whispered conversation. The footage was stored securely in the cloud, an irrefutable record of the truth. I also created a meticulous digital inventory of Eleanor's possessions, from her valuable antiques to her sentimental trinkets. Photographs, descriptions, appraisals, everything was cataloged, a digital fortress against future claims of theft or misappropriation. I linked her bank accounts to a secure online portal, monitoring every transaction, every withdrawal, every deposit. Eleanor, blissfully unaware of the storm I was preparing for, simply saw me as a loving, attentive granddaughter, perhaps a little overly cautious, but ultimately looking out for her best interests. She'd pat my hand, a twinkle in her eye, and say, "You're a good girl, Olivia, just like your grandfather, always thinking ahead." If only she knew. If only she knew the demons I was battling, the future I was desperately trying to prevent. But for now, ignorance was her bliss and my shield. I was building a fortress around Eleanor, brick by painstaking brick. And when Marcus finally arrived with his charming smile and his poisoned words, he would find not a vulnerable old woman and a naive granddaughter, but an impenetrable wall of truth and a warrior ready for battle. Chapter 7. The Return of Marcus. He arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon, the leaves a fiery carpet beneath his expensive Italian loafers. Marcus Thorne, my charming, manipulative cousin, looking every bit the successful prodigal son returning to the fold. His smile was as dazzling as ever. His eyes, however, still held that familiar, predatory glint. "Olivia, look at you, all grown up," he exclaimed, pulling me into a too-tight hug, his cologne a cloying, artificial scent. "And still living with Grandma, I see. How quaint." His surprise was palpable. He'd expected to find Eleanor alone, vulnerable, an easy target for his machinations. He hadn't counted on me being there, a permanent fixture in Eleanor's life, a guardian at the gate. The new security cameras, strategically placed around the house, also caught him off guard. My, Grandma," he said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Turning the old homestead into Fort Knox, are we?" Eleanor, bless her innocent heart, just chuckled. "Olivia's idea, worried about break-ins, you know. She's such a sensible girl." Marcus's eyes narrowed, his gaze flicking towards me, a silent challenge passing between us. He knew this was my doing. The game had begun. His visits became more frequent, his charm offensive in full swing. He'd bring Eleanor flowers, expensive chocolates, regale her with tales of his supposed business ventures overseas. He'd ooze sympathy for her failing memory, which, thanks to my vigilance, was still remarkably sharp, offer to help her manage her finances, an offer I politely but firmly declined on her behalf. But I was ready for him. I countered his every move, his every insinuation. I was always there, a silent, watchful presence, a constant reminder that Eleanor was not alone, not unprotected. The first confrontation was inevitable. It happened one evening after Eleanor had retired to bed. Marcus found me in the living room, reviewing some of Eleanor's financial statements, a task I had taken over, much to his chagrin. "You know, Olivia," he began, his voice deceptively casual, "it's really quite touching, your devotion to Grandma. But don't you think you're being a little overbearing?" I met his gaze, my own cool and steady. "I'm just looking out for her best interests, Marcus. Something you wouldn't know anything about." His mask slipped, just for a second, revealing the cold, calculating predator beneath. "Don't get in my way, Olivia," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You'll regret it." "Is that a threat, Marcus?" I asked, my voice equally low, equally dangerous. "Because I don't scare easily, not anymore." He stared at me, a flicker of surprise, of grudging respect in his eyes. This wasn't the naive, easily manipulated Olivia he remembered. This was someone different, someone stronger, someone who knew his game. Later that week, during one of Marcus's visits, Eleanor herself witnessed a crack in his carefully constructed facade. He'd been trying to convince her to invest in one of his shady, can't-miss business ventures. His voice a little too eager, his arguments a little too slick. Eleanor, her mind still sharp, had asked a few pointed questions, questions Marcus couldn't quite answer. His frustration had flared just for a moment, his charming smile replaced by a fleeting expression of impatience, of anger. Eleanor had seen it. I saw it in her eyes, a tiny seed of doubt, a flicker of unease. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The first chink in Marcus's armor. His return, like a shark sensing blood in the water, also brought Patricia and Richard scurrying back. Their visits became more frequent, their pleas for financial assistance more desperate. They saw Marcus as their ticket to Eleanor's money, their last hope of salvation from their self-inflicted financial ruin. The battle lines were drawn, the players were all in place, but this time, I wasn't just a pawn in their game. I was a queen, protecting my king, ready to counter their every move, to expose their every lie. The war for Eleanor's future, for her truth, had begun, and I was determined to win. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war room. Every conversation, every interaction was a potential piece of evidence, a weapon in my arsenal. The security cameras, my silent allies, recorded everything. The digital audio recorder, a discreet device I carried with me at all times, captured their whispered machinations, their greedy plans. Marcus, confident in his charm, his ability to manipulate, grew careless. He'd bragged to Richard about his foolproof plan to get Eleanor's money, unaware that his words were being immortalized, saved for a future reckoning. "She's an old woman, Richard," he'd say, his voice dripping with contempt. "A little confused, a little forgetful. It'll be easy. We just need to isolate her, make her dependent on us, make her believe Olivia is the enemy." Patricia, her desperation growing with each passing day, was equally reckless. I discovered through a series of carefully worded inquiries and a little online sleuthing the extent of her gambling debts. She owed thousands to shady loan sharks, their threats becoming more menacing, their deadlines more urgent. Her visits to Eleanor were no longer just about maintaining appearances. They were about survival. "Eleanor has to help us, Richard," she'd hiss, her voice tight with panic, unaware that her words were being captured by the camera in the hallway. "She's our only way out." Richard, fueled by alcohol and a lifetime of resentment, was the easiest to crack. During one of his drunken ramblings, a late-night conversation with Marcus that I accidentally recorded, he laid bare their entire scheme. "We need that money, Marcus," he slurred, his words thick and indistinct. "Patricia's in deep, and I just want what's mine. What Eleanor owes us." The most damning piece of evidence, however, came from an unexpected source: the Rosewood keepsake box. Sifting through the old letters, the faded photographs, I found it. A series of letters written years ago, in Eleanor's own hand, detailing Marcus's earlier transgressions. He'd stolen from her before, when he was a young man, a reckless, entitled youth. She'd forgiven him, given him a second chance, a chance he was now repaying with an even greater betrayal. Armed with this irrefutable proof of his duplicity, I showed the letters to Eleanor. Her face, as she read her own words, her own pain, was a mask of disbelief, of dawning horror. "I'd forgotten," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Or perhaps I chose to forget." The pieces were falling into place. Eleanor, her mind still sharp, her memory jogged by the concrete evidence of Marcus's past, began to see through their charade. The sudden attentiveness, the cloying concern, the constant subtle digs at me, it all started to make a terrible, sickening sense. She started asking her own questions, her gaze sharp and perceptive, challenging their flimsy explanations, their carefully crafted lies. She'd watch them, her eyes narrowed in thought, as they interacted with me, their veiled hostility, their forced politeness, now glaringly obvious. The tide was turning. The fortress I had built around Eleanor was holding strong, and the weapons I had gathered, the irrefutable proof of their greed, their manipulation, their betrayal, were ready to be deployed. The counterattack was about to begin. The stage was set. A family dinner. My idea. "A chance for us all to connect," I'd said, my voice deceptively sweet, "to clear the air." Marcus, Patricia, and Richard, smelling victory, eagerly agreed. Eleanor, her eyes knowing, her resolve steely, played her part, the gracious hostess, unaware of the storm about to break. The tension in the dining room was palpable, a simmering cauldron of unspoken resentments and greedy anticipation. Marcus, ever the peacock, preened and pontificated, already acting as if he were master of the house. Patricia, her nerves frayed, picked at her food, her eyes darting nervously towards Eleanor. Richard, already half drunk, mumbled incoherently, his gaze fixed on the wine bottle. The explosion, when it came, was even more dramatic than I had anticipated. Marcus, emboldened by Eleanor's seeming frailty, by my apparent acquiescence, launched his attack. "Grandma," he began, his voice dripping with feigned concern, "we need to talk about Olivia, about her influence over you." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her gaze cool and steady. "Influence, Marcus? What are you implying?" "She's manipulating you, Grandma," he said, his voice rising, his carefully constructed mask of concern beginning to crack. "Isolating you from your family, turning you against us, all for your money." That was my cue. "My money, Marcus?" I interjected, my voice calm but firm. Or the money you're so desperate to get your hands on? His face flushed with anger. How dare you? After everything I've done for this family. Done for this family, I repeated, my voice laced with sarcasm. Or done to this family. And then I played my trump card. The recordings. I placed the small digital recorder on the table, its red light blinking, a silent testament to their treachery. I think it's time we all heard the truth, I said, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. The room went silent as their own words, their own voices filled the air. Marcus, bragging about his foolproof plan. Patricia, her voice tight with panic, confessing her gambling debts. Richard, his drunken ramblings laying bare their entire scheme. Their faces, as they listened to their own betrayals, were a study in shock, in dawning horror. Marcus's bravado crumbled, replaced by a pasty-faced fear. Patricia burst into tears, her carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. Richard just stared at the recorder, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with disbelief. When the recordings finally ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor, her face a mask of stone, her eyes blazing with a righteous anger, finally spoke. So, she said, her voice low and dangerous, this is who you really are. Thieves, liars, manipulators. Patricia, her face streaked with tears, her body racked with sobs, broke first. We were desperate, Eleanor, she cried, her voice choked with shame. The debts, the threats, we didn't know what else to do. Richard, his drunken haze momentarily clearing, nodded miserably. Marcus, he said it was the only way. He said you wouldn't understand. Eleanor's gaze, cold and unforgiving, turned to Marcus. And you, Marcus, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. What's your excuse? Desperation? Or just plain, old-fashioned greed? Marcus, cornered, trapped, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, could only stare, his face a mask of impotent rage. The confrontation was over. The truth, in all its ugly, painful glory, was finally out. Eleanor, her heart broken but her spirit unbowed, had seen them for who they truly were. And I, the granddaughter they had tried to destroy, had become her avenger, her protector. The battle was won. But the war for healing, for justice, for a future free from their toxic influence was just beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation was a whirlwind of raw emotions and hard truths. Eleanor, though devastated by the depth of their betrayal, was also strangely liberated. The weight of their lies, their manipulations, had been lifted. She was no longer a pawn in their game, but the queen, firmly in control of her own destiny. The first order of business, the will. With Sarah, my lawyer friend, by her side, Eleanor rewrote her testament, her hand steady, her resolve unwavering. This time, there would be no ambiguity, no loopholes, no room for doubt. This time, the will would reflect not their greed, but her truth. Then came the family meeting. Not a dinner party this time, but a formal, somber gathering in Eleanor's study. Marcus, Patricia, and Richard, their faces etched with shame and apprehension, sat before her like errant schoolchildren awaiting their punishment. Eleanor, her voice calm but firm, addressed each of them in turn. To Patricia, she spoke of disappointment, of broken trust, but also of a glimmer of understanding. Your desperation, Patricia, while it doesn't excuse your actions, it does explain them. I will help you on one condition. You get help. Therapy, financial counseling, and no more lies. To Richard, she offered a similar lifeline. Your weakness, Richard, your addiction. It has destroyed so much, but it's not too late. I will help you too if you are willing to help yourself. Rehab, therapy. A chance to rebuild your life, to become the man you were always meant to be. Patricia, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame, nodded mutely. Richard, his hands trembling, managed to choke, "Thank you, Eleanor." But for Marcus, there was no such reprieve. Eleanor's gaze, when it fell on him, was cold, unforgiving. You, Marcus, she said, her voice like chips of ice. You are a different matter entirely. Your actions were not born of desperation, but of a deep-seated greed, a callous disregard for anyone but yourself. You preyed on my vulnerability, on my love for you. You tried to destroy my relationship with Olivia, the one person who has always been there for me, who has always loved me unconditionally." She paused, her voice trembling with a raw, righteous anger. "There will be no second chances for you, Marcus. No forgiveness. You are no longer a part of this family. You are no longer welcome in this house. You will receive nothing from me, nothing but the contempt you so richly deserve." Marcus, his face a mask of sullen resentment, said nothing. He knew he was beaten. He knew he had lost. With the traitors dealt with, Eleanor turned to me, her eyes softening, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "And you, my dear Olivia," she said, her voice filled with a warmth that enveloped me like a hug. "You are my rock, my savior. You gave me back my sight, my strength. You showed me the truth." She named me executor of her estate, a testament to her trust, her faith in me. But I insisted the inheritance be structured not as a punishment, but as an opportunity for healing, for growth. A portion would be set aside for Patricia and Richard, contingent upon their genuine efforts at reform. The rest, the bulk of the estate, would be mine, a legacy of love and trust, a foundation for a future free from the shadows of the past. Then Eleanor did something that brought tears to my eyes. She retrieved the rosewood keepsake box, the one that had once held a letter of apology, a symbol of her unwitting betrayal. But this time, when she handed it to me, there was a new letter nestled inside. "Read it later," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "When you're alone." I clutched the box to my chest, my heart overflowing with a mixture of gratitude, relief, and a profound, aching love for this extraordinary woman, my grandmother, my savior. The new will was more than just a legal document. It was a declaration of truth, a testament to the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit. Justice had been served. Healing had begun. 5 years. 5 years of peace, of healing, of rebuilding. 5 years of watching Patricia and Richard slowly, painstakingly put their lives back together. Patricia, with the help of therapy and financial counseling, had confronted her demons, her gambling addiction, her desperate need for external validation. She'd found a quiet strength she never knew she possessed, a genuine warmth that had been buried beneath layers of bitterness and resentment. Richard, after a difficult but ultimately successful stint in rehab, had emerged a changed man, sober, contrite, determined to make amends for his past mistakes. The family, once fractured and toxic, was now tentatively beginning to heal. There were still scars, of course, wounds that would never fully disappear. But there was also forgiveness, understanding, a shared commitment to a healthier, more honest future. Eleanor, in her final years, presided over this fragile peace with a quiet wisdom, a gentle strength. Her mind remained sharp, her spirit undaunted, her love for her family, in all its flawed, messy glory, unwavering. She passed away peacefully on a warm summer evening, surrounded by the people she loved, her hand clasped firmly in mine. The reading of the new will was a somber but ultimately uplifting affair. Justice, tempered with mercy, had been served. Patricia and Richard, having demonstrated genuine reform, received their fair share, a testament to Eleanor's belief in second chances, in the possibility of redemption. Marcus, who had refused all offers of help, who had remained consumed by his bitterness and resentment, received only one thing: the original letter, the one I had received in that other life, that other, darker timeline. I'm sorry I believed them. A fitting epitaph for a life wasted, a soul lost. To me, Eleanor left the family home, her personal belongings, and the bulk of her estate. But more importantly, she left me with a legacy of love, of strength, of an unbreakable bond that transcended even death. That evening, alone in Eleanor's study, surrounded by the familiar scent of lavender and old books, I opened the rosewood keepsake box. The new letter, nestled inside, was written in Eleanor's familiar, elegant script, the curve of this just so, the eyes dotted with her tiny, perfect circles. My dearest Olivia, if you are reading this, then my journey on this earth has ended. But my love for you, my gratitude for the gift you gave me, will live on forever. You didn't just save me from their greed, their manipulations. You saved me from myself, from the darkness of my own unwitting blindness. You helped me see the truth. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Live well, my darling girl. Live bravely, live truthfully. And know that I will always be with you in every sunrise, in every gentle breeze, in every beat of your loving heart. All my love, now and always, Grandma Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face as I read her words, tears not of grief, but of a profound, all-encompassing peace. The circle was complete. The ghost of the past had been laid to rest. The future, once a terrifying landscape of betrayal and despair, now stretched before me, bright with promise, filled with hope. I looked around the study, at the overflowing bookshelves, the comfortable armchair, the photographs of Eleanor, her face alight with laughter, with love. This house, once a symbol of my pain, my loss, was now a sanctuary, a testament to our enduring bond. Grandma Eleanor was gone, but she wasn't really. She was here, in this room, in my heart, in the legacy of truth and love she had left behind. And I, Olivia, her granddaughter, her protector, her friend, was finally, truly at peace, knowing that she had died understanding the truth about everyone, especially about me. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all.